Hello friends, welcome to Star Explainer. Tales of Herding Gods Part 388 explains based on novel. So let's start explanation. Ahead were the palaces of the Masters of Creation, a magnificent group of buildings. Looking at it from afar, the first thing one saw was its large tall walls that lay parallel against the cliff wall. It was extremely steep and smooth, with no gaps in the bricks at all. The wall gave off an awe-inspiring feel before they could get closer. This wall was as smooth and reflective as a mirror. Standing in front of it, they could see themselves and the scenery behind them. The buildings in the city were even taller than the wall. Beside the wall lay buildings like palaces and towers, as well as defensive buildings like sentry towers. Qin Mu and Luo Wushuang approached the city to size up its tall buildings. This city of the Masters of Creation was too big. Compared to it, they were little figures. The wall's smoothness was near impossible to create. Even the artisans of the celestial heavens and eternal peace wouldn't be able to achieve such a feat. Their artisans could polish such a smooth reflective surface, but to create such a large wall and keep it so flat would be impossible for them. Regardless of how good their algebra was, there would be tiny flaws in the construction process, but this wall had no flaws. The wall of the Masters of Creation could only be created via visualization, not construction. Why aren't the buildings here decorated? Luo Wushuang gazed into the horizon and saw that all of the buildings were plain with no decorations at all. He couldn't help but wonder why. Isn't it plain to have buildings entirely made out of white walls and red bricks? Qin Mu explained, the Masters of Creation were like this. They were very outdated too. Their society was somewhere between tribal chiefdoms and a country, and it contained little art. They were like a bunch of primitives. Shu Jun's angry voice appeared in his head. You're the primitives. Country bumpkins like you are the primitives. We are Masters of Creation. Omnipotent Masters of Creation, who created everything in the world. To us, you are the country bumpkins. Qin Mu walked towards the city and said, their lives were simple. Their tribal wars consisted of people wearing beast skin shorts, armed with bone clubs rushing at each other, striking at each other's brains. Shu Jun's voice trembled in anger. ****, don't you dare insult us. After they learned visualization and became Masters of Creation, they learned how to visualize beautiful ladies for pleasure, Qin Mu continued. Luo Wushuang couldn't help but comment, such primitives. Shu Jun was furious. Qin Mu suddenly stopped. Luo Wushuang was perplexed and looked at him curiously. Wrong. Qin Mu looked up at the walls, visibly perplexed as he said, this is the world created by the Masters of Creation. They created everything here, with no enemies. So, why did they build a city with such high walls? What made them so afraid? Luo Wushuang saw the link. The walls were used for defense, and such walls were clearly built to prevent exterior things from entering. Thus, what were they worried about? They were the creators of the Great Void. So what was it that made them feel fear? The walls are clean. There are no signs of battle. Luo Wushuang said, I feel that you may be overthinking things. Maybe they built the walls for show. Maybe they were narcissistic to the point of looking in the mirror all the time. Qin Mu shook his head and retrieved a sword to scrape the wall. A sword trace appeared before it disappeared very quickly. The wall became complete, flat, and reflective again. Luo Wushuang's heart jumped, and he said seriously, this wall reminds me of a celestial venerable, who was rumored to have created a divine art that allows a substance to never change. This isn't a substance created by the unchanging divine art, it's a substance created by consciousness, a visualized substance. Qin Mu said, this city is shrouded in the consciousness of the Masters of Creation, which makes it indestructible. Even if it's shattered, it will rebuild itself. On top of that, there are the sentry towers. The masters of creation had a chaotic combat style, which rarely used things like sentry towers. On top of that, the palaces and buildings here are high, because they were built to see into the distance and observe whether enemies would strike. He revealed his doubt. This was a world created by the masters of creation, so why would they create powerful enemies for themselves? That being the case, where did their enemies come from? Was it invaders from the celestial heavens like them? Or was it that there really were terrifying monsters in the great void? He couldn't help but recall the scene he saw in the consciousnesses of the walking corpses. Could it be the master of creation that plunged the great void in danger? Luo Wushuang pulled the core of the primordial tree out from between his eyebrows. After, his primordial spirit left his body, flew into the air, and looked into the city to survey it. There's no one inside. Celestial Venerable Huo. He recalled his primordial spirit, visibly surprised and shocked. He put the core of the primordial tree back into the heart of his brows and quickly said, I saw Celestial Venerable Huo. Celestial Venerable Huo. They looked at one another and instantly flew into the air before slowly descending into the city. Luo Wushuang quickly walked forward. He only saw blazing divine flames in front of him that melted the void around them. A man stood inside the flames, twisting the space. His silhouette was blurred. However, judging from the ring of flame behind his head, he was the celestial heaven's Celestial Venerable Huo. Luo Wushuang walked behind him and half-kneeled, saying, Spirit Elite Guards, Luo Wushuang hereby pays his respects to Celestial Venerable Huo. Celestial Venerable Huo, Celestial Venerable Mu led me here to receive you. Qin Mu walked beside him. Before continuing to walk, he said, Divine Knife Luo, this isn't Celestial Venerable Huo, it's a void imprint of him. Luo Wushuang was stunned. He stood up and followed Qin Mu to the front of this Celestial Venerable Huo, and sized him up carefully. He was able to find the great Tao rune that created this apparition, it was just that it was extremely small. This Celestial Venerable Huo was merely his great Tao imprint. Celestial Venerable Huo was truly too powerful. He fought people here, and his terrifying cultivation and great Tao imprinted his figure in the void of the city, unable to be erased. Celestial Venerable Huo must have met an unprecedentedly strong enemy here that forced him to use his techniques and divine arts to their limits. His great Tao rune was so strong that it imprinted him in the void, forming his figure. Even after it left, the apparition didn't disappear. Qin Mu looked in the direction of Celestial Venerable Huo's gaze and thought about it. He walked to the opposite side of Celestial Venerable Huo, and stood steadily before pointing out, his opponent stood here. Considering Celestial Venerable Huo's strength, his opponent must not have been weak, likely being as strong as him. Strangely though, why didn't his opponent leave behind an imprint of his figure? Luo Wushuang said, Overlord Body Qin, you're looking down on the Celestial Venerables. Outside of you, which one of them isn't so strong as to be unable to find a worthy opponent? Celestial Venerable Huo's opponent naturally wasn't as strong as him and thus didn't leave behind an imprint. Qin Mu shook his head. If his opponent wasn't strong enough, why would he be so defensive as to raise his cultivation power to its limit? Luo Wushuang was stunned, for it made sense. It was just that Celestial Venerable Huo was so powerful, so where in the world could he have found an opponent of similar strength? Unless... A terrifying thought was birthed from his mind. Unless it was Celestial Venerable Shu, who was with Celestial Venerable Huo. Celestial Venerable Shu fought Celestial Venerable Huo here, forcing the latter to use his full power, which caused him to leave behind the great Tao imprint. And Celestial Venerable Huo got injured. Qin Mu lifted his arm to point at Celestial Venerable Huo's imprint. Luo Wushuang looked in its direction and was greatly shocked. The great Tao rune on the heart of the imprint of Celestial Venerable Huo was extremely blurry, suggesting that his enemy must have hit him, causing the imprint to be missing in that position. Celestial Venerable Huo was indeed injured. It was just that, could anyone really injure him? Could it really be that Celestial Venerable Shu struck at Celestial Venerable Huo? Luo Wushuang was going to examine it, but Qin Mu pulled him back hurriedly. He shook his head and explained, if it was a complete Great Dao Rune imprint, it would be stable and unlikely to explode. However, a part of it is missing from his chest, which makes this imprint unstable. If you touch it, it's likely to explode and incinerate us to ashes. Luo Wushuang stopped immediately and looked at him, saying, you know a lot. I'm a celestial venerable and an overlord body. Of course, I know a lot. Qin Mu smiled and carefully sized up the injury on Celestial Venerable Huo's imprint. His heart stirred slightly as he asked, is Celestial Venerable Shu's weapon of choice a sword? Luo Wushuang shook his head and said, Celestial Venerable Shu is strongest with divine arts and rarely uses divine weapons. That's strange. Who used a sword to harm Celestial Venerable Huo? Qin Mu inquired, which Celestial Venerable in the celestial heavens has the best sword skills? Luo Wushuang looked at him. Qin Mu rephrased the question and asked, except for me, who has the best sword skills? Luo Wushuang shook his head. I haven't heard of a Celestial Venerable whose sword skills are unrivaled. Each one of them has their strengths. Sword skills belong to the post-celestial Great Tao created by post-celestial creatures. Which Celestial Venerable would attempt it? The Celestial Venerables seek pre-celestial Great Taos, and only gods and devils like me who didn't enter the path would seek post-celestial Great Taos like the sword path and knife path. Qin Mu was stunned as a thought appeared in his head. He mumbled, maybe that Celestial Venerable could. Is he here? Is he really here? Luo Wushuang was confused about who he was talking about. Qin Mu suddenly became agitated. Throughout history, only one person cultivated the sword path to the point of 33 heavens, the first person whose sword path was top-notch. He wasn't within the 10 Celestial Venerables, but he had the title and was one of the 5 founding elders of the Heaven Alliance. Celestial Venerable Qin Yi, who had transmigrated with him into the Dragon Han era, whose alias was Founding Emperor, Qin Kai. Was it really Founding Emperor, who fought Celestial Venerable Huo? Qin Mu suppressed the agitation within him. If the person who injured Celestial Venerable Huo was Founding Emperor, then Carefree Village was in the Great Void too. He really wanted to meet this ancestor and Dao friend of his. If Carefree Village is in the Great Void, then my brother should be here too. If I can contact him, I can find Carefree Village. He tried to establish a connection with Qin Fengqing, but felt nothing. Qin Mu frowned and glanced at Luo Wushuang. He suddenly smiled and said, Divine Knife Luo, are you interested in making a pact of Little Earth count? Luo Wushuang was confused. Qin Mu smiled. Your knife against my sword. Knife path against sword path. We only use these 2 skills and no cultivation. If I lose, you can do anything you want to me. If you lose, you will betray the celestial heavens and swear your allegiance to eternal peace. Luo Wushuang probed him. You will lose heavily without magic power cultivation, and with only our sword skills and path and knife skills and path. I have already cultivated my knife path to the point of 13 heavens and am about to reach the 14th. However, your sword path is still at 3 heavens, right? Qin Mu smiled. Are you willing to gamble? Luo Wushuang shook his head. No. I'd prefer that you fight me in the same realm, even if it means you have a cultivation advantage, instead of taking advantage of you. Qin Mu frowned. How stubborn. However, Luo Wushuang's insistence did rouse admiration in him. Celestial Venerable Huo is bleeding. Luo Wushuang moved to the back of Celestial Venerable Huo's imprint and looked at the wall and its edges. There was a drop of flaming blood on it. Within the flames, a sword light hovered above the fresh blood. Qin Mu came to its side and examined it carefully. This was god blood of a celestial venerable, which contained a celestial venerable's divine art within it. The power within the blood and the sword was contained, but both of them still felt fear. Don't touch it. If you do, the balance will be broken. If the power contained in the god blood of the celestial venerable is unleashed, this place will be completely destroyed. Luo Wushuang took in cold breath and backed off, whispering, even if I recovered fully and was back to peak condition, I still wouldn't be able to escape. Qin Mu backed off too. He didn't dare to release any aura so as to prevent breaking the balance of the divine art within the god blood. This drop of god blood was too dangerous, and an even more terrifying fact was how if the god blood exploded, it would impact Celestial Venerable Huo's imprint, and cause it to be activated too. At that moment, suddenly, two lights flew on top of the tall city walls and danced around like butterflies above the city. It was two ladies battling to the death. Little wretch, you stole my man, killed me, and lived your life under my identity. You're the wretch. You kept trying to harm me. You think I didn't know that? You hid for so long, but I had already guessed that you were hiding amongst the 10 celestial venerables. Today, I'll skin you and reveal your true identity. Qin Mu and Luo Wushuang were stunned as they looked at the two figures above. Suddenly, the lights were separated. Yun Chuxiu and Lian Huahan broke apart, and stood on two different towers. Their clothes fluttered, and their beauty was unrivaled. You allowed your son, Hao, to kill my son, Qi. Do you think I didn't know about that? You reared a pretty boy, Celestial Venerable Yu, and hooked up with him to plot for the throne of Celestial Emperor. Do you think I didn't know about that? Wretch, the two ladies simultaneously hollered before fighting again. Luo Wushuang's face was pale. He felt like he had heard things he shouldn't be hearing. All along, his eyes were cold, his expression icy. He seldom smiled and looked as though he carried a deep and bitter feud. However, the details shared in Yun Chuxiu and Lian Huahuan's conversation were indeed shocking. He couldn't help but be appalled. There are two celestial venerables behind these two ladies. Who are Hao and Qi? Could Hao be Celestial Venerable Hao? Also, that lady actually referred to Celestial Venerable Yu as a pretty boy. Luo Wushuang acted decisively, hiding among the shadows of the structures below. He beckoned Qin Mu, signaling that he should hide quickly as well, before being discovered by the two ladies. Qin Mu was also confused by what he heard. Luo Wushuang hurriedly rushed out to drag him into the shadows. He lowered his voice and said, "Do you want to die? If we are discovered hearing all of these secrets, we're dead for sure. I heard there used to be an ancient god in the celestial heavens, who was killed from behind as he charged onto the battlefield, because he knew too many secrets." He and Qin Mu arrived among the shadows, feeling extremely shocked and terrified. During the first year of the Dragon Han era, he knew that Celestial Empress backed Celestial Venerable Yu. Celestial Empress was enraged when she discovered her sister, Mistress Yuan Mu, had an affair with the ancient Celestial Emperor and gave birth to Celestial Venerable Hao. Celestial Venerable Hao was abnormally clever. He opened the 5 elements' divine treasure, and hence became a Celestial Venerable. Her son, however, didn't have such glory. For the sake of her position, she supported Celestial Venerable Yu and suppressed Celestial Venerable Hao. He felt that Lian Huahan should be the one saying that Yun Chuxiu had reared the pretty boy Celestial Venerable Yu, but instead, it was the opposite. This was something he didn't expect. All along, he thought that Yun Chuxiu was Celestial Empress, but he now realized it was the other way around. Yun Chuxiu was Mistress Yuan Mu, while Lian Huahan was Celestial Empress. Qin Mu was flirting with the mother of Celestial Venerable Hao. That day at the Jade Pool, I fought with Yun Chuxiu and forced her to execute her ultimate skill. Since she was impersonating Celestial Empress, that means the ultimate skill she executed wasn't real. Cold sweat was rolling down Qin Mu's forehead. This was a trap, a gigantic trap. Whoever believed that was her ultimate skill would die a terrible death. As to why she immediately helped me upon seeing Mistress Yuanmu's corpse in the crystal coffin, it wasn't because she was worried that Mistress Yuanmu might return back to life, but rather that her identity would be revealed. Qin Mu was drenched in sweat. At that point in time, if he had tried to summon the soul of Mistress Yuanmu, he would have ended up summoning the soul of Yun Chuxiu, exposing her on the spot. Also, it would then be uncovered that Mistress Yuanmu was still alive. This little maiden, Qin Mu gritted his teeth. The two traveled through the shadows quietly. The structures of the Masters of Creation's city were extremely huge, which aided them in not being discovered by the two ladies fighting above. The above battle between Yun Chuxiu and Lian Huahun was terrifying. One by one, towering structures were destroyed by their divine arts, as small hills and giant rocks of all sorts fell from the sky. The sight made Qin Mu and Luo Wushuang's scalps go numb. If these structure fragments smashed into Celestial Venerable Huo's imprint, or that drop of god blood, the entire city, including them, would be wiped out. Bizarrely, before they could land, these structure fragments disintegrated and disappeared into mid-air, turning into a strange consciousness that rose up into the sky. Those structures then regenerated after being destroyed, as though they were being rebuilt by an invisible divine power. This was the wonder of the Masters of Creation's city. Although those structure fragments were unable to land on the city, the aftermath of the two ladies' divine arts was able to ripple through. The two may be of the divine bridge realm, but Qin Mu was very familiar with their real abilities. On the ship, Lian Huahun had attacked him before, breaking his forearms. And when he fought Yun Chuxiu, both suffered heavy injuries. Their abilities weren't inferior to true gods, and they were even stronger. Even so, they didn't display their true ultimate skills. They were trying to force each other to execute their actual techniques, so as to reveal which Celestial Venerable they were. Whoever's identity was revealed would die first. After all, Celestial Empress and Mistress Yuanmu were ancient gods. They were as infamous as the ancient Celestial Emperor, in the Heaven Alliance, and were bound to be killed by the other Celestial Venerables. The early goal of the Heaven Alliance, when it was first established, was to give people the right to survive. However, during the middle of the Dragon Han era, after Celestial Venerable Yun recruited Celestial Venerable Huo and the rest, the goal of the Alliance shifted to killing the ancient gods in order to wrest back the right to rule. Hence, ancient gods that had infiltrated the Heaven Alliance absolutely couldn't afford to reveal their identities. Qin Mu and Luo Wushuang traversed through this empty city at great speed. They were feeling a little fearful. The divine arts of Yun Chuxiu and Lian Huahun were too powerful. Who knew when the aftermath of their divine arts would trigger Celestial Venerable Huo's imprint, or that drop of god blood? This was akin to having a knife placed at their necks, not knowing when they would die. Similarly, they couldn't afford to reveal their identities. If the two ladies discovered them, they would be killed. These two ladies would absolutely not allow anyone to know their secrets. Even Qin Mu would have to die. Although he was still useful to them, no amount of usefulness could match up to the importance of one's life. Now, Qin Mu finally understood that the more one knew, the faster one died. Maha! The head of a divine dragon suddenly appeared in front of them. It broke into a smile, opening its mouth to lick the stunned Qin Mu with its bright red tongue, excitedly saying, Maha! Maha! Qin Mu's face turned ashen, while Luo Wushuang's limbs went cold. This divine dragon was produced when Qin Mu was creating things at the top of the mountain. He planned to use it for transport. However, as his abilities were insufficient, the divine dragon that he visualized was unable to fly. Hence, it was abandoned by him. He didn't expect the divine dragon to follow their scent all the way here. Above, the sound of divine arts clashing suddenly stopped, and so did the tremors. The city was once again quiet. The foreheads of Qin Mu and Luo Wushuang were covered with cold sweat. Qin Mu made a hush sign to the divine dragon. However, it was too stupid to understand its meaning. The two and the dragon tiptoed forward, trying to secretly walk out of this life-threatening city. Oh, it's Celestial Venerable Mu and Divine Knife Luo. Suddenly, a lady's laughter could be heard from the above palace in front of them. The two and the dragon raised their heads, and saw Yun Chuxiu sitting on the palace's roof. Her palms were placed on the side of the roof as her calves dangled, swaying leisurely. Her calves were attractive. They were fair and had beautiful curves. Yun Chuxiu laughed. Celestial Venerable and Divine Knife are so secretive. Where are you heading? Qin Mu gave a cough. Before he could speak, Lian Huahuan's voice came from behind. She asked coldly, "How long have Celestial Venerable Mu and Divine Knife Luo been here?" Yun Chuxiu giggled. Is that important? Qin Mu coughed and said, "We just arrived and were about to meet Celestial Venerable Huo. He's also in the city." Yun Chuxiu and Lian Huahuan's expressions changed drastically. Lian Huahan immediately flew up and surveyed her surroundings. Right at this moment, many rays of divine light flew over, landing in the city. Shui Yuqing, disciple of Celestial Venerable Zhu, pays my respects to Celestial Venerable Mu. Huai Yu, disciple of Celestial Venerable Lang, pays my respects to Celestial Venerable Mu. Pan Chunjin, disciple of Celestial Venerable Hao, pays my respects to Celestial Venerable Mu. Luo Fengqing, disciple of Green Deity of the Eastern Sky, pays my respects to Celestial Venerable Mu. Loud and clear sounds rang as the light rays landed, transforming into true gods one after another. They surrounded Qin Mu, standing on top of those ancient-looking majestic structures, and looking down at him, revealing their excitement. Celestial Venerable Mu, we almost died at your hands. I bet you didn't expect to see us here alive. Xiao Yufang chuckled. After Celestial Venerable Mu is dead, we can return to the celestial heavens and announce to the people that Celestial Venerable Mu died in the Great Void while trying to save us. He will live up to the good name of a Celestial Venerable. However, that's only after he's dead. Huai Yu was warm and gentle and had a smile on his face. He leisurely said, Celestial Venerable took advantage of the absence of my master, Celestial Venerable Lang, and murdered the disciples of our Lang Xian Divine Palace. At that time, I was away, or else my senior and junior brothers wouldn't have died such terrible deaths. Today is the day of Celestial Venerable's death, hence avenging my dead brothers. Celestial Venerable, do you have any last words? Pan Chunjin laughed. Whatever last words he may have, they are useless. In the Great Void, there's no Yudu or Mingdu. We are outside the jurisdiction of Heaven Duke, and Goddess of Heavenly Yin is unable to come here. Dying here means that your soul is indeed scattered, truly dead. Qin Mu looked at his surroundings. There were over 10 true gods that had arrived. He didn't care much about the disciples of Emperor's Throne individuals. However, the disciples of Celestial Venerables were by no means insignificant. These more than 10 true gods were able to beat him to a pulp. There was no need for them to hide the true intention of this journey anymore. They wanted to kill Qin Mu, then return to report on their mission. Earlier, they clearly needed to ensure that they survived traversing the Great Void. Qin Mu glanced at Luo Wushuang and whispered, Has Divine Knife Luo recovered from his injuries? Luo Wushuang hesitated a while. Obviously, Qin Mu's intention was to use him as an accomplice to get rid of these disciples of celestial venerables and Emperor's throne individuals. Now that he knew the secret of Celestial Empress and Mistress Qin Mu, he had no chance of staying alive unless he fought. However, his injuries were too serious. His celestial palace had yet to recover. If he pulled out the core of the primordial tree and fought recklessly, his celestial palace was likely to crumble and be destroyed within an instant. His divine knife was also destroyed. Facing these true gods, he was helpless. Lian Huohan flew and landed on the roof of the palace in front of them. She said, "It's Celestial Venerable Huo's imprint rather than Celestial Venerable Huo that's in the city. He ran into terrifying enemies here. As he fought them, his great Tao was imprinted here." Yun Chuxiu was astonished that there was someone in the Great Void who was able to match up to an existence like Celestial Venerable Huo. She chuckled. In that case, Celestial Venerable Mu is trapped in a hopeless situation. Since Celestial Venerable Huo isn't here, it seems that no one is able to stop all of you from killing Celestial Venerable Mu. She sighed and said softly, "Celestial Venerable, I'm sorry. Even if it was me facing this situation, I would be helpless." At this moment, the sun set in the west, descending among the mountains as the sky gradually darkened. Suddenly, many lanterns lit up with intense brightness, illuminating the entire city. Waves of roars were heard from afar. Qin Mu's heart stirred slightly as he cried, "I knew it." Everyone paid no attention to his words as they raised their divine weapons and executed their divine arts, preparing to kill him. Yun Chuxiu smiled. "Celestial Venerable, what have you discovered?" Qin Mu composed himself. "I finally discovered why the masters of creation of the Great Void built such high city walls, and what the walls are defending against." Everyone was slightly stunned, and there were some who looked around their surroundings. Lian Huohan frowned slightly as she flew and landed on a sentry tower, scanning the city in all directions. The roars came from the darkness outside of the city, and they were getting nearer. "Pan Chunjin, earlier you mentioned that there is no Yudu or Mingju here. Also, we are outside the jurisdiction of Earth Count and Heaven Duke. In addition, those who die here won't return to the jurisdiction of Goddess of Heavenly Yin. In that case, for people who die here, where do their souls go?" Qin Mu's eyes were bright as he solemnly said, "The souls of the dead naturally remain in the Great Void." Yun Chuxiu couldn't help but say, "Celestial Venerable Mu, do you think that these words can save your life?" Qin Mu shook his head. "I'm not asking you to spare my life, I'm saving yours. It's the Great Void here." Everyone was confused. Qin Mu said coldly, "This place is teeming with the consciousnesses of the masters of creation. Those who die here, they end up wandering around the Great Void. Since their grievances were unleashed, what do you think the masters of creation's consciousnesses would transform them into? In Yudu, the grievances of the dead become monsters, even producing devil gods, or heavenly devils. These devil gods and heavenly devils carry with them negative emotions, plundering, killing, and committing all sorts of evil. However, Yudu is under the jurisdiction of Earth Count, which is why these devils are unable to cause much trouble." Everybody's hearts jumped. Yun Chuxiu hurriedly flew and landed on a sentry tower, and her delicate body froze as she looked around the city. As there is no Earth Count here, what's being produced would certainly be more powerful and sinister than the devil gods. They are what these masters of creation of the Great Void were guarding against. Qin Mu sighed and said, "I was trying to save you. Unfortunately, all of you were persistent in taking my life. I predict that we're no longer able to escape." Pan Chunjin, Huai Yu, and the rest were skeptical. They each flew on top of the sentry towers. Within the darkness, they saw many gigantic, ferocious-looking figures. They couldn't help but turn pale. Part 388 end here. Thank you for watching.